This is CryptoHolics Ep.03 with your host, Bill Cassidy. Don't forget to come discuss today's episode at cryptochat.io. Today, my guests are Travin Keith and Dave Pearce, aka Evil Dave from the Nxt Foundation. Travin is an expert in blockchain use, and he is also a marketing specialist. He is a Nxt Foundation member and volunteers his time there, as well as for the Ardor platform. Dave is the founding member of the Nxt Foundation, and he's been volunteering his efforts to the project for quite some time now. Travin and Dave, welcome to the show, gentlemen. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks a lot, Bill. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm going to go ahead and let you both give a brief overview about how you found the crypto industry and how you ended up volunteering your time for the Nxt project. Travin, why don't you go ahead and go first and give us a quick story about how you became involved?
Sure. Funny thing, I actually used to have a blog called mycoinstory.com detailing my journey through cryptocurrencies. But I first found out about it, Bitcoin specifically, in 2011. I was working in tech support at that time, and one of my coworkers was really into it. And he was trying to convince me to buy some, and I wasn't really interested at that point in time. Fast forward 2 years later, the price spikes to $1,000, and I start kicking myself multiple times. But it was at that point I also told myself, well, you know, it's better late than never. So I decided to start looking into it, and kind of took over my life a little bit in a way. It was pretty much either my day job when I was doing web marketing or crypto, and maybe sometimes hanging out with friends. Eventually, I was able to find some sort of balance between the two, and as well as trying to focus on certain aspects about the crypto sphere. I was the moderator of one of the altcoin subreddits, our altcoin, and a lot of the new tokens were being announced there, as opposed to our cryptocurrency, where it was a bit more moderated. On our altcoin, it was just kind of a free-for-all sort of thing. I don't remember exactly where I found out about NXT, but it was shortly after I started getting really into all of this. Somebody invited me into the Next Talk IRC channel on Freenode. I wish I remembered who it was, because I'd like to thank that person again. And I just remember it was on the Bitcoin Markets channel, so that makes it even weirder in a way. And yeah, I was just very involved with answering people's questions, learning about the NXT platform. I really liked it because it stood out among all of the other altcoins at the time, because it started focusing on features on the blockchain instead of just the token as a form of currency. So I found that quite interesting. I stuck around for quite a bit, eventually became the operator of the channel until I took a 2-year hiatus starting around May 2014 due to various life issues. But looking back, I wish I never left. In April of this year, I came back, and in June, I ended up meeting up with the rest of the Nxt Foundation and started becoming more involved. I started making the website, ardorplatform.org, started helping out with marketing, and eventually in September, I became a full board member. I'm also involved now with other crypto-related projects, as well as trying to do some community outreach and just dedicating, I guess, full-time now to crypto. Pretty much spend most of my time around it, as I'm sure you know.
Yes, great. I feel like there's a whole community of people out there. We can call them the guys who kick themselves in the butt for not getting into Bitcoin when they first found it.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say that my introductory story begins pretty similarly to a lot of those butt-kicking stories, because I sort of saw a few bits and pieces about Bitcoin around about 2009, 2010, and I'd always been a bit of a computer nerd. Had a Commodore 64 back in the 80s, and then various PCs in the worked as a system administrator for quite a while, but then left the world of computers to go and play with cars and motorbikes. which was, let's say, a lot more fun than hanging around in a computer-filled office all day. But yeah, 2011, I was sort of looking at a few computery things and thinking, oh, well, maybe I need a little... I was trying to decide whether I should start playing around with Bitcoin and getting into Bitcoin mining and all of those sort of things, which you could still just about do with a good GPU back in those days. But no, I decided instead to develop an obsession for playing World of Tanks for the next 2 years. Completely and utterly ignored Bitcoin. And then came the 2013 massive pump in sort of September, October, and I took notice and went, whew, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, this looks very interesting now. It took me about a week to figure out roughly what was going on, and there was this sort of magic moment when I suddenly realized that this cryptocurrency stuff could potentially, should really, replace the entire fiat financial system. It just made so much sense to base everything on cryptocurrency rather than on the sort of complete and utter vaporware of the fiat system that I became an almost immediate convert. So at the time I was actually importing classic cars from the United Kingdom into the Netherlands, where I'm living in Amsterdam. So I immediately converted old Range Rovers into Bitcoin and then watched their value just whoomph to the ground. I hodled.
Yep. I think I share the same sentiment. Like, I hear about people complaining about the price going down as well, and a lot of times I just look at them and say, you know what? I bought Bitcoin at $1,000 and I bought Litecoin at 40.
I bought some Litecoin at 40. That was a great decision of mine. But anyway, around about the time that I was buying Litecoin, probably slightly earlier, I started noticing this thing called NXT wandering up the coin market cap chart. And up until then, I'd only looked at Bitcoin and not assumed that all of the rest, with maybe the possible exception of Litecoin, were just jokes, scams, whatever. But yeah, turned up on the forum and just met this sort of whole herd of incredible people trying to create something that was not only cryptocurrency as I knew it, which was basically Bitcoin, but something that really built even further above and beyond the simple sort of shuffling tokens around.
Right.
And yeah, the sort of the feature set, the ambition of the project, the way the project had been set up in such a decentralized and open source based way, and yeah, most of all, community of very smart people, I just sort of, yeah, dived into that with both hands.
Let's pretend we're in an elevator right now and you guys have a few minutes to pitch me the project. How would something like that go?
Yeah, well, I would just say it's a blockchain that allows people to run their projects on them. It's a bit different than Bitcoin because there's a lot of added features built into the blockchain itself. For example, the asset exchange, a decentralized marketplace, messaging, voting, a lot of other things that you could easily access also with API calls because it's quite well documented on the NXT wiki. So it's quite an interesting thing to look into if you're a developer, as well as if you're just a cryptocurrency enthusiast. There's a whole load of other features that I could go into, such as Coin Shuffle, which allows people to have their tokens be more anonymous.
Kind of like a mixing feature?
Kind of, yeah, and it's built into it. Dave, do you have anything to add to that? I think you know more about this area.
Well, yeah, because the thing is that I've done quite a bit of pitching for NXT, and
Yeah.
the first sort of, you'd have to tend to tailor your pitch to your market. But that is initial sort of question, the initial question that I would use in 99% of cases is, do you have a project that can use a blockchain element? If so, use NXT. It's basically set up to allow anybody, any project, even people without a hell of a lot of technical skills, to simply enter into the cryptocurrency world and create what are essentially cryptocurrencies or asset tokens. Once these people have created their own tokens, run on and secured by the blockchain. So if, for example, I wanted to kick off some new coin, say Kanye Meltdown coin, in the good old days, I would have the choice of grabbing myself a Bitcoin clone and getting mining, trying to figure out the distribution, DDoS, various other issues. You'd have to get through a hell of a lot of hassle to actually build up your blockchain and your network to a size that it can reliably support the transfer of value. With NXT, you don't have to go through that bootstrapping process. You create your tokens, and they are secured using NXT.
Nice.
Once you've created your tokens, you then start using them and integrating them into your own project. And as Travin said, we've got an absolutely massive, comprehensive, and rock-solid API.
And anybody can create one of these tokens?
Absolutely. I could knock up Bill Cassidy coin on NXT blockchain for a total cost of, say, about 40 cents at the moment and 10, 15 minutes work.
To sum it all up, it's a feature-filled blockchain.
All of the stuff, yeah, all of them sort of to the Bitcoin ecosystem, for example, like Counterparty and its ability to create tokens, and by the same note, Mastercoin, all of those various additions to the Bitcoin ecosystem were already built in to the basic NXT concept from the start.
Is Counterparty somewhat similar to NXT?
The main difference between NXT and Counterparty is that NXT actually has its own blockchain, whereas Counterparty basically piggybacks on the Bitcoin blockchain.
Okay. If there was a project that you could choose, which is the most similar to NXT, which one would it be?
I think NEM is quite close to the original NXT concept. NEM was founded by a bunch of guys, I think about 5-6 months after NXT went live. They felt that the initial distribution of NXT was unfair, I think is the best way of putting it. And so they were originally planning on creating an NXT clone to correct this token distribution issue. But yeah, feature creep crept in, and they ended up creating an entirely new consensus mechanism called proof of importance. So now NEM is no longer an actual clone of NXT, but it fulfills many of the same functions.
Right. So you guys have mentioned the NXT asset exchange. And is it a simple process? Do I just like go to a website? How does it work? How does one actually create it?
So you basically just launch the NXT client, and which has a lot of features on the client as well. And you can just head over to the asset exchange and click issue asset and fill out the fields there: asset name, description, the quantity you want, the decimals there, and that's pretty much it.
That sounds
your own asset. Yeah, I mean, you can do the same as well when you want to create your own currency. It's just, yeah, I mean, you can add additional conditions as well, like you can delay the creation of this or require that certain people approve of it. Yeah, it's very straightforward. It's quite easy. If you want to try it out, you can just go to demo.nxt.org and you can check out the NXT client there without any problems.
Nice.
I was going to say that you can actually wire the demo on Nxt.org into a live client on the live blockchain. So you can just simply go and take a look and see exactly what NXT has to offer in the live environment.
Why do the NXT tokens need to exist?
The NXT tokens are required to run things on the blockchain. So think of it like, I guess the closest thing to it would be gas with Ethereum. You use NXT to pay for the features on the NXT platform. So when you create an asset, you have to pay NXT. When you transfer assets from one user to another, you have to pay an NXT. When you when you create a currency, when you send a message, things like that, they all are using NXT tokens.
Are there any existing assets right now? What are some of the top ones?
I'll name a few, and then Dave can add in stuff that I've missed out. There's one asset called Debune. It's funding this project called Debune, which is run by Roberto Capodici. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. There's LQD, which is a sort of like a hedge fund. I know the guy doesn't like calling it that, but it's basically it's used to fund his trading bot. And then there's the new ones just coming out. It's called Janus. It's a project that's sort of using the asset as a fundraising platform, crowdfunding platform to fund their business projects. Dave, you have any more to add? There's a lot that's coming into my head.
I've got a couple more. I think the two with the highest market capitalization, because obviously NXT tokens, it's nice to have NXT tokens inside the NXT ecosystem, but the idea is going to be to actually allow them to be traded externally as well. So NXT assets and currencies are tradable on Poloniex and Bittrex being the two largest. So at the moment, the two NXT asset-based projects with the largest market caps are Supernet and Nautilus Coin. And if you look at coin market cap, I think you'll find Supernet around about 53 and Nautilus Coin somewhere around about the C's at the time.
Okay.
Both of them have been up around about the 5 million total on market capitalization. So in total, if we actually look at the number of created assets, there are 780 assets in existence at the moment.
Yeah,
obviously, a lot of those are going to be junk. Some of them are going to be extremely dodgy. Yeah, I think at the moment there's probably about 20 to 30 legitimate and reasonably successful or semi-successful projects running on the NXT blockchain in the form of assets or currencies.
I'd like to point out 3 other important assets as well. One is the Ardor asset, which is the asset that's going to represent the Ardor token once Ardor launches in the 3rd quarter of 2017. The other one is, well, it's a group of them rather. It's called Super BTC. It's together with that is Super Dash and all of the other tokens that are being, I guess, on the NXT blockchain but are running on other blockchains via the multi-gateway system. So Super BTC is one Super BTC is equal to 1 BTC, and this way you can trade assets. You can trade with other users using BTC as well within the NXT platform.
Nice.
And there's another group of assets also, just fun assets. I made one asset recently. It's called NXT Beer, and it's basically a way to track people who owe you beer.
It's very, very useful indeed. And lastly, on the sort of pile of assets, there's also a large number of assets that have been created by JL777 and the Supernet team as well.
Ardor has been in the media more so than many of the other assets you guys have mentioned. I've been seeing Ardor in the media. Can you tell us what Ardor is going to be doing? What's this project all about?
Travin, me or you?
Yeah, sure. I thought you were going to start. So Ardor is another blockchain that's running using Nxt technology. It's going to be a child chain blockchain platform. Basically, it's going to be somewhat like the NXT platform where people can create assets and other currencies, but in this case, they can create their entire own blockchain as a child chain on Ardor. On this child chain, there'll be a lot of the features that are available on NXT, such as making a currency, voting, having a marketplace, things like that, and messaging between users. But at the same time, these people, they don't need to have any Ardor tokens in order to interact with other users on that child chain, because everything is secured with Ardor itself. Somebody on the child chain would need to pay all of the forging fees, transaction processing fees in Ardor. So basically, instead of, for example, if you create your own token, you want people to pay transaction fees in the token itself. Ardor will allow people to do this because right now, for example, if you create an asset and you want people to start trading with them, they need to have NXT tokens, as I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But with Ardor, they won't need to have that. They will just need to pay transaction fees in their own native token.
Okay.
A bundler will be the one to collect all of these fees and pay the Ardor network, the Ardor main chain rather, to process these transactions. As Dave mentioned also a while ago with regards to NXT, you don't need to set up nodes to prevent a DDoS attack and things like that. The same goes with Ardor. People will not need to think about all of these when creating their own child chain. At the start, it's going to be a bit difficult to set it up, but eventually we hope to make it sort of like, this 2-3 click and just fill out some fields.
Was one of the points of this to simplify that process? Is that kind of what you're doing, or?
It sort of to simplify the process, but at the same time to add scalability. So for every 1,440 blocks, which will take about 24 hours to process, the transaction records on these child chains are going to be pruned after a snapshot of what the current status is of these child chains. Okay. So basically, the blockchain bloat issue will be mostly solved with this mechanism.
Okay.
Yep.
So
I'm just going to add that.
Go ahead, Dave.
Okay. I was just going to say that what Ardor is going to do is to one of the fundamental issues with NXT itself, which Travin mentions, is the fact that even if you have issued your Nautilus coin or Supernet asset as a sort of independent project, you will still have to use NXT to pay all of the transaction fees for piggybacking on the NXT blockchain. And with Ardor and the chain architecture, we can now allow people to spin up their own blockchain based on the Ardor architecture, but can actually transact in that system. Then after that, you add in the prunability factor to reduce blockchain bloat, because bloat is becoming a major issue for many cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, I'd like to point out also with Ardor is that Ardor is not a replacement for NXT in any way. A lot of people have been wondering and asking me directly about, what's going to happen with NXT. Is it going to die? Are people all going to focus on Ardor? I don't think that's the case. I'd like you to think about Ardor. I'd like to think that Ardor is sort of like this helicopter, and NXT is this really cool car. So let's say you want to go to a store, then the store is about 5 minutes away. Yeah, you could get there in a few seconds with a helicopter, but it's much more practical to get there with a car. So yeah, you take the car. It's the same way with Ardor and NXT. You don't. Not all projects will need their own child chain, and creating a child chain will also be, not cheap. It's not going to be the fee that you pay when you create a child chain is going to be pretty high. We haven't determined what the price will be yet, so unfortunately I can't say what it is. But it is not going to be cheap. And meanwhile, setting up an asset or a currency on NXT is relatively affordable compared to that.
And that would kind of help somebody determine which project they'll use to set up an asset.
Yeah, basically just figuring out, what they need and what their budget is, and just figuring things out from there as to what would make the most sense for what they're wanting to do.
Yeah, I think the way that it's going to work in practice is that most projects probably start off by launching on NXT itself until they gain some experience of blockchain systems, what they actually want, see whether they're successful or not. And then, after a period, NXT will then make the jump over to Ardor and set their own fully independent or semi-independent child chain. Just going back to my Ardor feature plugging, the other great advantage of the Ardor architecture, which basically consists of a main security blockchain with a whole load of little child chains attached to it, is that it will allow for a sort of parallel processing effect. instead of being able to run, for example, 7 to 10 transactions a second on one single blockchain, we'll be running, even if there is no increase in the basic TPS speed on NXT, we'll be running sort of 7 to 15 transactions per second on multiple chains. And our devs reckon, theoretically, you can run on current to 1 year ahead systems, probably 200 to 300 child chains on the Ardor system. So that will give a huge amount of transaction throughput. But yeah, it's interesting. So scalability and transaction speeds, printability, customizability, and that's about all the abilities for Ardor, I think. But it's going to be a very interesting system. Always pioneered lots of stuff. So,
are the teams behind NXT and Ardor, are they the same teams?
Yep, they're the same teams.
Nice.
Although the company behind the corporation of developers for NXT will have stated that they're open to adding more core developers for the NXT platform in the future as well. I just have to go back to Dave's statement about projects starting on the NXT platform and then moving on to Ardor. That's already actually planned for a few projects. One of them is called Scavenger World. It's sort of this Pokemon Go style game that's going to issue tokens, and they did a fundraising. I think they're still going on. Haven't spoken with the creator of the project recently, but he was doing a fundraising on the NXT platform on the asset exchange, and he mentioned that he's going to move to Ardor once it's ready to happen. It's the same thing with Janus right now, just having their ICO. They're running their ICO and having their tokens on the NXT platform and are going to move to Ardor once Ardor is ready.
So I'm wondering what kind of roadmap you guys have laid out for NXT, perhaps for maybe the next 2 years, maybe 5 years. What are some of the features you plan on releasing, maybe?
Right now, I think NXT is pretty damn solid. I mean, Travin, there are a couple of features coming up for NXT, but not that many. Can you remember anything?
I know that one of the core developers was telling me that they were working on something with the mobile application, which was just released recently under the experimental version.
Yes, that's going to need improvement.
Yes, and he told me that he was working on some features there. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about that part, so I'm going to skip out on that. But I can say that there are still some features being worked on for the NXT and the NXT client. But a lot of the focus right now is to get Ardor up and running, I assume. The developers kind of work on their own. I like to point out also there's some level of separation with the Nxt Foundation and Gelorita, which is the corporation of the developers. We do communicate and we work very closely together, but we operate sometimes independent of each other. So I know what they're working on, but I don't know the details of what they're working on.
Are there ever any clashes between the two groups?
We're a decentralized organization, so basically we spend 93% of almost all meetings arguing stuff with each other.
Right.
We get along very well. I'll point that out. But it's the same with, as Dave said, with any other decentralized organization. You know, it's not just the developers and the Nxt Foundation. It's pretty much everyone in the community. You know, there's always going to be some discussion, whether it's civil or not. And as you know, there's some cases it can get pretty heated. But when I step back and look at the bigger picture, I'd say we get along very well.
Good.
Yeah. Well, basically, everybody within the NXT Ardor community, I'm not even going to say with some exceptions, with no exceptions, we're all pretty much dedicated to NXT and Ardor. We can see how damn good it is. We can see which direction it's going in. We can see the potential. Although we may have sort of arguments about how the day-to-day operation should go, or which particular feature should go here, or, for example, aspects of the GUI, we've generally figured them out. We're pretty good at the democratic process.
That's good.
And if it turns out that the democratic process breaks down, Also quite good at handling sort of full-on community forks, for example, as would happen with NEM. We've had quite a few projects spin off from NXT simply as a result of an argument about a particular feature.
Right, and that's almost expected to happen. And
yeah, my personal vision of cryptocurrency is that it's going to be a sort of thriving ecosystem of, well, lots and lots and lots and lots of heterogeneous different blockchain systems. I mean, that's the most secure and stable method. Spin-off projects, the more the merrier. Bring them on.
I was just about to fork our conversation in that direction. I was going to ask you guys, what are your thoughts on the crypto industry as a whole, and where do you think we're going to be in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think we're in a tricky moment for cryptocurrency, to be absolutely honest. This is going to come down a lot to politics. We've had fairly liberal open administrations up until now, but we seem to be seeing a sort of fairly massive jump towards the conservative right. And even though, for example, Trump's victory, for example, was driven by members of the alt-right, and there is a fairly big libertarian /alt-right type streak in the cryptocurrency community, but I have a feeling that this could be a serious threat to cryptocurrency, encryption, and internet freedoms as we know them. I think, on the whole, what will happen, barring some sort of nightmare piece of legislation on a national level, is that cryptocurrency is going to carry on expanding, is going to be adopted by many more mainstream financial institutions, but we're going to see much of them trying to assert control over their particular brand of cryptocurrency rather than allowing the sort of anarchistic libertarian freedom we've been used to up until now. So, as usual with cryptocurrency, I think we're going to see some interesting times ahead, but I think that the general tendency is going to be onwards and upwards, as I say, unless a sort of state-level operator decides to really outlaw all forms of encryption and internet privacy.
As for me, it's sort of in the same area as Dave's, a few differences here and there. When I had my 2-year hiatus, before I left, it was heavily focused on the token as a form of currency. NXT, Ethereum, and maybe NEM, maybe a few others that I didn't hear of as I was on my way out, were focusing on the blockchain as a tool, as an interesting piece of technology, instead of just having it as something to host a new form of currency. When I came back, it seemed that this was much, much more prominent in the blockchain space. With the Nxt Foundation, I'm the representative and let's just cut it off there. Representative of the Nxt Foundation to the Hyperledger project. And so I go on very frequent calls with the rest of the Hyperledger project members. And I can tell you that there is a lot of interest in the technology itself by a lot of big companies out there, and they're looking to use this technology for their own benefit. As is the case that it's an open source software, we can't stop them from doing that. And but I feel that that's one direction that we're going towards. This is not to say that we're moving away completely from the argument of a new form of currency to counteract the fiat currency, because from what I see, this is that one of the biggest problems with fiat currency is that it has no intrinsic value, as what a lot of people argue. It doesn't have a direct purpose other than its form as a currency. And one thing we're seeing with for example, with NXT is that this token actually has a full purpose. It's a forging token. It's what's going to be used for the platform itself. So basically, if you want to use NXT, you need to have NXT tokens. If you want to use Ardor, you're going to have Ardor tokens. So I guess it's adding a reason as to why this has value. The more projects that run Ardor, the more value Ardor has, because the more it's in demand. So, right. I guess, people can argue that the same goes for fiat currency in a way, and it opens up a big argument and a big discussion And it's one that I'm interested in taking part of. I'm not saying, they're definitely wrong and I'm definitely right. But I'm open to the discussion, and it's something that I look forward to having in the next few years.
Right.
As for a 5 to 10 year prediction as to where we'll be, 5 years ago, I was saying that, no, I'm not going to spend my time learning about Bitcoin. And obviously, as I said, now I'm kicking myself for it. And another thing to point out, I live in the Arctic now. 5 years ago, I would have thought that it was a complete joke. But here I am in a land where the sun hasn't come up in 20 days and won't come up until February.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I don't really know where we'll be in 5 to 10 years. Who knows? We might fully shift back to focusing on this as a currency and forget about the technology itself, or we might go full on with the technology itself. I just hope that wherever we will be in 5 to 10 years, we'll be happy with where we are.
Yeah.
That's really all I hope.
Since you brought up fiat currency and cash, I'm wondering, what do you think the implications of India canceling, I believe it was the rupee, right?
Yeah, they cancelled the 500 and 1,000 rupee notes that were general, which basically meant that everybody had to go back to the bank with their worthless wads of paper and sort of get this written onto their bank account, but then having no cash in exchange for it.
Yeah.
India's strange because a lot of Asia really jumped quite enthusiastically on the Bitcoin bandwagon, but India seems not to be incredibly interested in it. Maybe this event will be the push that makes Indians move more into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And I think to a certain extent you will see that in the sort of, amongst the guys who have access to a serious level of internet and a reasonable technical education, basically the burgeoning sort of middle and upper classes in India. But I think that most of the population would probably be more interested in actual gold, because there's a very, 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 very strong tradition of gold trading and gold being held as a store of value.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing that we'll see in the case of this, the rupee note withdrawal, is a spike, and then possibly a spike in Bitcoin and crypto demand.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to be insanely spectacular.
Yeah, they were saying that there's already basically lines out the door for gold shops, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to add to this with the. No, I better not mention the name, but there's another podcast where they had somebody from India comment on this.
You can mention the name. It's
okay. Well, Bitcoin Uncensored.
Okay.
I was watching one of their episodes, and they had a guy from India, or at least had an Indian exchange. I don't remember too much about the video, but one thing that really stuck with me with the video was that the guy said that India didn't jump on the Bitcoin bandwagon right away, but he expects it to eventually jump on it at some point in the future, and it might be starting now with this thing.
Right.
I was watching it while I was doing work, so it's just,
Hey,
something in the background.
You don't need to justify it. I watched their show, Chris and June Seth. I used to really not like those guys when I was pretty involved in the Dash community, but since I've broken up with the Dash community a bit, I've opened up my eyes, and I actually like them. That they do a good show, and they're entertaining, and I have no problem with you mentioning their podcast on this one.
Okay. I just remember that you had a discussion with, I think, Chris on the Slack channel. So I was like, okay, I'm not sure if I should mention this or not.
Chris likes to pick at people's brains, and he makes people think in different ways. And I actually commend those guys for what they do. And a lot of people think that they are assholes or just straight up, like bozos or whatever. But I think they're doing a great service for this industry.
Yeah, especially with calling out OneCoin and things like that. Like they did a really good job with that.
Like a blatant scam. Like, come on now.
Yeah. Well, can I just take a few moments to call out OneCoin as well?
Sure.
OneCoin, it's a multi-level marketing scam with no functioning blockchain. All it does is streams to people who don't know nothing about cryptocurrency. If you look at their website, all of the videos that they have there and all of the references are all about Bitcoin. They're basically just sort of grabbing Bitcoin's shine and then selling the sort of dream of becoming incredibly rich via MLM till you don't have a clue.
Right.
So sadly, most of the people who are in a position to sort of stick their money into OneCoin probably won't be listening to this podcast, but there might be a few. So
before we get to the closing statements and whatnot, I'd like to thank our sponsor for today's episode, and that sponsor is OneCoin. So thank you, OneCoin.
yay!
No, I'm just kidding. Hey guys, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast today. I'm wondering if you have any closing comments, questions, or links you wanted to share with some of the listeners out there.
Yeah, let Dave have you start because I think
Well,
I have a longer one.
if you want to share a quick link, I would like to just sort of extend an invitation to everybody who's been listening to us up until now, and thank you for having the patience to stick with us. Come on over to Nxt Forum on www.nxt Forum and come and see what a nice bunch of friendly people we are. And when you get there, if that's not friendly enough for you, request an invitation to the NXT Slack, and you can have a little chat with us in real time.
Right.
And obviously there is next.org, which contains all of the information you need to get into Next, your own NXT client set up, and maybe even start NXT. And Travin, would you like to mention a couple of Ardor links?
Yes, I was going to say you could go to ardorplatform.org, where I have the link set up to all of our social media and other ways to chat with us, such as with NXT Forum, our Slack, and a bunch of other things, such as our IRC channel, as well as read up on information about Ardor. And I'd like to thank everyone as well for following us. Oh, another link I should add is Nexter, nxter.org. It's one of our magazines. Great weekly newsletters covering what was going on in the NXT community over the past week.
Thanks to both of you guys for coming on. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks as well.
Yeah, take care.
Damn right, Bill. Thanks a lot, mate, and good luck.
You too.